Hello, I'm Eilidh's wicked stepmother. I definitely haven't been paid off to tell you to join the Generally Spooky History Patreon. It's the best. I use it every day, and I think Kieran and Eilidh are just the most amazing super fandango human beings. I absolutely haven't accepted a bribe to encourage you to support their podcast and enjoy all of the exclusive content that they release over on their Patreon. Generally Spooky History is the best podcast that there's ever been or will ever be, so make sure you're not missing out. Can I have my broomstick back?
I am Inga Larissa.
And I am Jennifer Rose.
Whiskey Sister, the podcast.
We're two whiskey pals serving a weekly whiskey podcast and rocking your whiskey world.
Exploring the whiskies and distilleries of the world and meeting amazing people along the way.
We'll be sticking our noses into our drams and all things whiskey.
So fill your whiskey glass and join the fun.
So I heard you're looking for a fight.
What?
Yeah, because I just heard that we were recording. Ding, ding.
God. How long have you had that one lined up? Jesus Christ.
Yesterday morning, that came into my head. I've had to sit in it until now.
Kieran!
Hi, everyone.
You upset the dog.
Your laughter upset the dog.
Well, do you want to introduce us? You're
Hello.
on fire.
Oh, well, I've peaked now. I've peaked at like 30 seconds in. This is the Generally Spooky History podcast. We take the deep dive into Scotland's grisly past, myths and legends. And today, Eilidh's here to tell us a story.
Mm-hmm. And Kieran's here to deliver more top-tier comedy content. That's what he's here for. That's why he makes the big bucks. I've yet to see any of these bucks, but he makes them.
They're there, apparently.
And this is why.
Apparently. Eilidh will be telling us the story today, my lovely co-host and wife, and I will be listening to the story the same as you are. And I believe we're carrying on the spooky thing for Spooktober.
Spooktober.
Yeah.
Yes, I've been trying to make this our 6th season, the spookiest season. So let me know how that's going. I don't know what day it is anymore, so...
Who knows? But we're here, we're getting spooky, and we're feeling good. At least I am. Eilidh's
I
feeling
can
worse
tell
now.
you're feeling good. I could tell. Oh my god. I can't believe that just happened. I got. I absolutely got.
That's why I couldn't tell you beforehand.
Well, just a couple bits of housekeeping before we get into the episode.
Mm-hmm.
We've merch available
Mm-hmm.
with our new logo, new designs. Generally Spooky History is in the house. So get yourself a t-shirt or a sweatshirt or a hat.
Yep.
It's great.
Celebrate the podcast and support your favourite host.
And if you skip through the ad read at the beginning, frankly, you're missing out because we haven't really talked about them in episode
No,
yet.
we've not.
They are the best thing that's ever happened. But if you did skip through it, be sure to join our Patreon because we have so many cool things happening over there at least once a week.
Loads of content. You'd get to see some behind the scenes video footage
which
from our today's topic.
We've just started doing. We haven't really done that before. That's all over there. Lots of Odin. Everyone loves that.
Everyone loves that. And more extra episodes. We blether about the episodes after each one. Loads of stuff. Come
It's a
check it
great
out.
time. And it's a great way to support the podcast.
If you laughed at our joke at the start of this, then you'll love it. You should come join the Patreon. If you laughed, you have to. That's the rule.
Anyway, should we play some music?
I think we should play some music.
So, since we are well and truly into spooky season, it is now mid-October, I thought I would treat all of you to some Scottish castles.
Everybody loves a nice haunted castle.
You guys seem to really enjoy them. Whenever we do a castle episode, you guys seem to love it.
Mhm.
So I have 3 for you this season.
Oh, yes.
I've queued them all up over Halloween, so you're going to get all your spooky castle content that you desire.
Mm-hmm. Through October, maybe even into November.
Mm-hmm. I have no idea how long the season's going to be.
Who knows?
I don't. No clue.
We're here for the ride, though. We're excited to find out.
So this week, we're talking about Crathes Castle.
Oh, yes.
And we got to visit this one.
We did. That was exciting. I always love it when we get to visit.
It makes such a difference. It's
Mhm.
great when we're able to.
Yes. And this was a particularly spooky location to visit.
Mm.
Or so I'm told.
Yeah, Kieran disagrees.
Yeah.
But it was fantastic. Absolutely love visiting. If you can, highly recommend you go. But you might want to hear the story first.
Mm. Listen to us while you go. Who knows?
Okay, so if you're ready, shall I just dive in?
I think so. Back to the, I'm going to say 1300s.
Oh, so much earlier.
Oh, really?
So much earlier. What's funny is I've actually already talked to you about this.
On the podcast or like me in person?
No, you in person.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh. And I was definitely listening. But I won't spoil or anything for the listeners at home, so you better take the lead.
What's it like having a partner that listens to the things that you say?
I wouldn't know.
Let me know. What?
Almost.
Crathes Castle was owned by the Burnett family for hundreds of years. They were given the land surrounding it way back in the 1300s, like you guessed. So it was a good guess. And the castle was turned over to the National Trust for Scotland in the 1950s. So once again, we're talking about a very long stretch of time that a property has been in the hands of one family.
Yeah. I always feel like it should be owned by like the Cratheses, you know, since it's their castle. Or it should be Burnett Castle. Don't know why.
It does happen sometimes. Before we get to all of that, though, before the Burnetts and before National Trust had anything to do with the place, there's evidence that people weren't living there all the time, but hunter-gatherers continually returned to a site very close to Crathes Castle.
That's interesting.
That's now called Warren Field. So we're talking very, very old.
Yes. If we're back to the hunter-gatherers, big time.
So this is pre-farming.
That's a long, long-ass time ago.
Yeah.
So what evidence do they have of that? Did you see?
Well, there were these pits that were discovered near Crathes. For once, I'm not getting gory. They're just pits.
I was about to say burial pits.
But they were discovered after aerial photos were taken of the site.
Uh-huh.
So you couldn't see them from the ground, but you could see the evidence of these really weird markings, kind of like crop circles, but not. The pattern of these pits, you could see it from the air.
Interesting.
So archaeologists spotted it and went, that's unusual.
Mm-hmm.
What could that be? So they discovered these pits and they turned out to be from between 8,000 and 4,000 BC.
God damn.
So potentially about 10,000 years old.
Wow.
Which is bananas.
That is bananas. So are these pits where there were like shelters built on top?
Well, that's the thing. It would be bananas enough if it just, this is a hole that was dug 10,000 years ago.
Yeah.
In my mind, that's kind of impressive on its own.
Yeah.
But scientists claim that these pits are actually the world's oldest known lunar calendar.
That's so not what I expected you to talk about. How could...
The world's oldest lunar calendar from
Well,
potentially about 10,000 years ago.
obviously, badass. What do you mean a lunar calendar?
Well, it's a little bit confusing. They were dug in an arrangement that meant that they could track the position of the moon in relation to the pits.
Mm-hmm.
So they knew what time of year it was.
Interesting.
So before the Warren Field was excavated in 2004, that was when they discovered it. The oldest evidence of humans trying to create time, because that's what's happening here, it was in Mesopotamia before this. But the pits at the Warren Field are about 5,000 years older than what had been found in Mesopotamia.
Very cool.
And Mesopotamia is in what is now Iraq.
Okay.
So these are significantly older.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's over-exaggerating that these were people creating time.
Yep.
It didn't... I mean, it's difficult to say it didn't exist, but the concept of tracking time didn't exist before this.
Well, it's a weird thing, time, if you think about it for too long.
Right?
I also thought Mesopotamia was in South America for some reason.
Nope.
Don't know why.
No. Oh, like it's an area and it covers what is now Iraq, but it's changed a lot over centuries,
Yeah.
millennia. From what I read, these pits weren't accompanied with evidence of a permanent settlement, so they weren't living there all the time. They were still hunter-gatherers, but the reason that they created this calendar with this pit system was because they needed to know where their prey were going to be depending on the time of year.
Yep, that makes sense.
They needed to know when the seasons were going to change because it was a matter of survival.
Yeah. So interesting.
Right? I got a bit lost. I looked into the scientific paper, what was released at the time. I've read things by the scientists who worked on the project. I'm going to try and explain some of it to you now, but I don't really understand it. Highly recommend you look into it if you want to know more.
Yeah, definitely. That is fascinating stuff.
So Dr. Christopher Gaffney was one of the guys who worked on the project, and here's what he said. For prehistoric hunter-gatherer communities, knowing what food resources were available at different times of the year was crucial to survival, like what we were saying. These communities relied on hunting migrating animals, and the consequences of missing these events were potential starvation.
Yep.
They needed to carefully note the seasons to be prepared for when that food resource passed through. So from this perspective, our interpretation of this site as a seasonal calendar makes sense. And you know he's a scientist because he's talking about their interpretation of the site. At no point is he saying this is definitely what this is.
Yep. Scientists are always quite good at that. They never set anything in stone.
But this is unusual because there aren't a lot of things like this from the hunter-gatherer period because they were always on the move.
Well, that's just it. They didn't stay in one place.
So they were less inclined to build monuments that have lasted.
Yep.
But this exists.
So interesting.
And it tells time.
Seems much more complicated than counting the days between full moons.
Well, yeah, it's really interesting the way it works. Like I said, it's confusing. I have a little bit from the journal that the findings of the excavation were published in.
Yep.
You can take from it what you will. This structure, dated to the 8th millennium BC, has been reanalyzed and appears to possess basic calendrical functions.
Good word.
Calendrical. The site may therefore provide the earliest evidence currently available for time reckoning, as the pit group appears to mimic the phases of the moon and is structured to track lunar months. It also aligns on the southeast horizon and a prominent topographic point associated with sunrise on the midwinter solstice.
Interesting.
In doing so, the monument anticipates problems associated with simple lunar calendars by providing an annual astronomic correction in order to maintain the link between the passage of time, indicated by the moon, the asynchronous solar year, and the associated seasons. The evidence suggests that the hunter-gatherer societies in Scotland had both the need and ability to track time across the years, and also perhaps within the month, and that this occurred at a period nearly 5,000 years before the first formal calendars were created in Mesopotamia.
Damn.
Now, I know that was a mouthful and there was a lot there,
Yep.
but I couldn't describe it better myself, so I thought I would just quote from the journal.
Quite right. Quite
So yeah,
right.
they have all these different alignments that it kept track of the sun and the moon.
Well, because we know about leap years, but that's because somebody told us. If you had to figure out that every 4 years there was a leap year, otherwise you lose track of where you are, you'd be screwed.
But they anticipated it and they had a way of correcting things like that with this pit system.
So do you stand in the middle of the pit and then look around? Why is there a pit?
Honestly, I'm not sure.
That's okay.
I'm not entirely sure. I just know that they were dug in a particular direction and alignment that meant that they were aligned with certain measurements. It's difficult for me to explain.
Yeah, that's
you would
fair.
kind of need to look at it and suss it out for yourself. But isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
That they were able to track the months, the years, and they had a way of making sure that this calendar stayed accurate.
Mental.
That's insane.
Absolutely mental.
It's right in Aberdeenshire.
Yeah. I remember listening to Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about calendars. So I forget I can't remember if the Georgian calendar is the one we use now or the one before the one we use. It sounds like the one we use now. But anyway, we use that one because people have claimed, like, oh, it's too connected to, like, Christianity and religion and things. But it's just the absolute best calendar there is, because it only loses one day every, like, 10,000 years or something.
You are referring to the Gregorian calendar.
Ah, so close.
Which went into effect in 1582.
There you go. Gregorian. Because the calendar that was used before that, it didn't have leap years. So I can't remember how long it was, but it fell out of sync by like 12 days every like 50 to 100 years or something. So the first day of spring basically moved every year on the calendar because it wasn't as accurate. So that they made one that's self-correcting, is very awesome.
I feel like before they could even articulate fully like what it meant, because it's purely survival based. So we need to know when these herds move through this area. Okay, we know that it looks like this when that happens. Sweet. We're not going to starve this winter.
Yeah.
The project leader, Vince Gaffney, who worked on the project, he said that this discovery illustrates one important step towards the formal construction of time and therefore history itself.
Whoa.
So what we're looking at is the genesis of our understanding of the history of the world.
You can't look too closely at it.
It's absolutely wild. It's why I spent quite a lot of time looking into this, even though it's a fairly minor part of the story. Because as soon as I started reading that kind of explanation and that verbiage, I was just completely taken with it. I was like, oh my God, like, it's so significant.
It's incredible.
And yeah, if you start looking at it too closely, everything just starts unraveling.
Who am I? Do you think the day the herd went past was known as Herds Day?
I don't know. So that's the Warren Field.
Yes.
If we skip ahead a few millennia, we end up in 1323.
Oh, the 1300s.
Yes.
I got caught in a technicality.
I mean, would you have rather I'd skipped the Warren Field?
Definitely not.
Because it is insanely cool.
So that's nearby to Crathes.
Very close near the castle.
Yeah.
1323, that's when the Burnets are gifted the land that Crathes Castle would be built on.
Yes.
And they were gifted the land by none other than Robert the Bruce.
Very good.
That old fella.
I think I've heard of him before.
You think? Are you sure?
Yeah.
I don't know if you're joking.
Old Bobby the Bruce. Pretty sure he's come up before.
I mean, you might not be kidding.
We'll never know.
The Burnets were rewarded by King Robert for their loyalty and their service to him, and were given the land around Crathes to Alexander Burnet specifically.
Okay.
I keep going between Burnet and Burnett. Feels Burnet.
I would have said Burnet.
I'm probably wrong. I'm always wrong.
Who knows?
We're just gonna go. Alexander Burnet became the Royal Forester of Drum, since the area around Banchory and Crathes Castle was a huge forest that the king liked to hunt in.
Okay.
So Alexander became the keeper of this forest on behalf of the king.
Ah, I see.
Which was a pretty important honour. And because of this honour, he was given a badge of office to show that he had the king's favour and he was one of the king's men. So that people would know who he was. And that he had been rewarded so. Alexander was given the Horn of Lays all the way back in 1323. 700 years ago this year.
Oh, that's funny.
And it's still at Crathes Castle.
We saw it.
You can go see it.
Yeah.
It's in a frame on a mantelpiece.
Hanging up. It's very cool.
So it's made of ivory. The guide that we spoke to when we were there said it could be a boar's tusk.
Yeah, they're not sure what it is.
It would make sense given the size and the shape of the thing.
It's very curved, very curly.
And it has metal bands, precious stones, the whole shebang presented to the Burnets. Very special. So it's wild that you can go and see this horn.
Yeah, these things don't normally survive so well.
It's immaculate. Absolutely immaculate. Wild that they still have this thing.
This symbol of what made the family. You know?
Yeah, where the family came from. This was the start of it all. A lot of conservation work has gone into that bad boy.
Yeah.
I am sure.
The the guide who was there we spoke to said it only gets taken out for cleaning very occasionally. I'm like, yeah, why would you even want to take it out if it's protective little like glass frame thing?
Why would you breathe on it?
Yeah. Lest it crumble into dust.
It was incredible. Incredible to get to see it in person. So honestly, if you were swithering about going to the castle, that's worth it. That alone. Before we even get into any spooky stuff, there's this piece of history on the wall as if it's just normal and nothing. It's right there.
Just sitting looking at you.
Mm-hmm. So the horn was presented in 1323, but back in 1323, Crathes Castle didn't actually exist yet.
Ah, yes. Mm-hmm.
It hadn't been built. The Burnetts were actually living... This is the coolest thing ever. You're going to love it. They were living out on a crannog in the middle of Loch of Lays.
Oh, the crannogs are so cool.
So it's a big house built in the middle of a body of water, a loch, usually made of wood. It's up on...
Like stilts.
Yeah, like big logs in the water. It's raised out in the middle. It's great for defense. It can house a lot of people. They were usually significantly sized. And yeah, they're good to defend because people have to come out following the one path into the water.
Yep.
And usually you can be ready for anyone coming for you. So this is what the Burnetts were living in the 1300s.
Oh, I mean, I want to know why you'd swap that for a castle. But it would be very cold and very drafty living above a body of water, wouldn't it?
And it's not as big as a castle.
No. And it would rot a lot faster than a castle would.
Like, it's a fair size, but it's not the same size as the current Crathes Castle.
Yep. And if everyone else had a castle, you'd be totally jelly.
Yeah. It was like all the Georgian country homes.
Exactly.
They went into fashion and then everyone had one.
Mm-hmm. You'd be like you'd be seen as a savage if you still lived in a crannog, wouldn't you? And everyone else lived in castles.
Yeah, especially with that attitude of you are uncivilized because you're living outdoors.
Yeah.
The site that the crannog was on has been excavated and investigated, and they've been able to find solid evidence that it did exist.
That's cool.
The Loch of Lays was drained in 1850.
I was just wondering, is there even a body of water there anymore?
No. I mean, it's boggy now.
Just a big puddle.
Well, there's still a lot of water in the land, but it's not a loch anymore.
Got you.
When it was drained, the Burnett boss of the time took the chance to investigate his old family home.
Nice.
Because that's where they had been living. Quote, what James Burnett found in 1850 went on to become some of the defining features of crannogs in Scotland. Vertical wooden piles driven into the loch bed with horizontal timbers, he identifies as oak and birch, that make up the inner part of the crannog. Additionally, the antiquarian excavation found several bronze jugs, a quern stone for milling grain, coins, but one of the workmen ran off with them, and a log boat about 50 metres away from the crannog. This was the first recorded excavation of a crannog in Scotland. Unquote.
Whoa, that's cool. Am I the only one who'd be raging if he'd left his coins in the crannog and it sank?
No, I think a lot of Scottish people would identify with you on that one. Oh, for fuck's.
Oh, man. My doubloons.
Isn't that wild? And I'm assuming one of the reasons this was the first one was because he knew it was there.
Oh, yes. So presumably he had records indicating it was there.
There were records of when the castle was built and when the family moved. So they knew where they had been living, so they knew where to look. That's
so bizarre to think that he and others knew crannogs existed, but no one had found any proof. That wasn't just like written records. Because, I mean, written records are good proof, but it's not like finding remains, is it?
But then you have to wonder if he just knew where the old family home was. It wasn't that it was a crannog, it's just, they used to live here.
Oh, that's true.
So maybe it was more singular than that. It didn't realise it was part of a wider pattern.
Maybe.
The crannog site was investigated again in 2016, so much more recently, with much better excavation methods. I'd imagine they kind of despaired at the job that James and his men had done back in 1850. Because they don't know what they're doing, really.
Well, if they know someone ran off with the coins, what do they not know people ran off with?
Yeah. I was reading about how they got on excavating the crannog this time, and it's super interesting. The whole process was just fascinating. It isn't completely safe for them to do it. They have to pick their moments quite carefully because, they've drained the loch, but like I said, it's a pretty dangerous bog, even though the loch was drained. They can only check it out in really dry summers.
That makes sense.
And the summer of 2016 wasn't a dry summer.
No.
But the previous winter, they kind of planned ahead and they built a bridge made of about 40 wooden pallets that they put out in the winter time.
Mm-hmm.
So it was well established. So when summer came around and they were investigating, they could make their way out to the Crannog and they were safe.
Very nice.
So don't go looking for things like this yourself in bogs. They know what they're doing.
Don't become one of the bog people.
No. Ooh, bog. When they looked at it in 2016, they discovered old stonework, old bits of timber, uncovering it all from the mud. Really difficult to spot and find.
Well, yeah.
Very good at what they do.
How would you distinguish just a branch from a purpose, like from a beam?
Yeah.
You know?
Archaeology at its finest, that they were able to identify all these things in the muck.
Yeah, or like a stone from some brickwork.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
And the stonework that they found was like still laid into the ground, kind of. There's photos that you can look at and you can see that it's still built up. It's just under all this bog. It's so cool.
So cool.
From what I was reading, they were a little disappointed because while James had found whole logs standing up in the mud, indicating where it used to be, none of that really survived up until 2016. So they couldn't see it for themselves. They were kind of looking at like pieces of timber, splinters that were left. They didn't get the same big reveal that he wrote about.
That makes sense. But then you wonder how accurate he was.
Well, if he was, he may have been completely accurate, but he's not going to know the same methods of conservation that they do.
Oh, right enough.
To look after these things and preserve them, sorry. That's more what I mean.
Because I was thinking, because if it's been down there for 500 years, from 1300s to 1800s, but it's not survived another 150, seemed a little unlikely. But then if it's been perfectly like packed into the like mud or the bog or whatever's down there, and then it's suddenly revealed to the air, it might, deteriorate faster.
I don't think they would have been as concerned with preservation or known how to do it in the same way.
And you'd be so buzzing you just found it in the first place. You wouldn't particularly want people 150 years to know it's still there because you've already discovered it.
But it's interesting because the ones who looked in 2016, they could see where it all used to be. They had the site and they knew what they were looking for, but just wasn't quite the same.
Yep.
So this is how the Burnetts were living. Burnetts.
Just think, burn it to the ground. You'll remember.
I need to pick one and stick with it. The Burnetts were living like this when Robert the Bruce gave them the horn. They were living in the Crannog. And they lived there for longer than you might think.
Oh, yes.
Because construction didn't start on Crathes Castle until the 1500s.
Oh, really?
Whoa. So they were living on that Crannog for a long time.
Damn. That is far longer than I thought.
Right?
I assumed it'd be like straight away, get me out of this place.
No. I guess because it's defendable.
Yeah, and building a castle would be expensive.
It's very cool.
Very cool.
The fourth laird was Robert Burnet, who fought at the Battle of Harlaw Hill.
Harlaw.
It's hard to say. Harlaw Hill.
I think I'm nailing it. Harlaw.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Harry's Hill and Hole.
Oh, what was it?
Harry's Holes and...
Hope. Hole. Just talking about a hole. That's not great.
Please see a previous episode.
Robert Burnet, he fought at this battle in 1411. So we're going to start with him.
Cool.
Donald, Lord of the Isles, big boss of the West, wanted more...
Donald.
His name was Donald.
It's always Donald in the Isles.
Donald MacDonald. He wanted more territory, and he planned to get it in Murray.
The Lord of the Isles planned to get it in Murray.
Yes, so Lord of the Isles has been fighting with the Earl of Ross for a long time because their territories border each other.
Yeah.
So now Donald is looking further east and he's looking into Murray going, I'll have some of that actually. That looks grand. But the Earl of Mar, called Alexander Stewart, who I believe was the illegitimate son of the Wolf of Badenoch.
It sounded familiar.
Well, his name was Alexander Stewart too.
Yep.
The Earl of Mar, Alexander Stewart, he was determined that Donald shouldn't get it. That he shouldn't be able to move into Murray and gain more territory. Even though Donald was moving in and making his claim, accompanied by about 10,000 men.
Oh, that's how you make a statement right there.
10,000 men
Damn.
invading territory.
I don't think even a Cranag would help you at that point.
No. We're talking like Helm's Deep level
Yes.
conflict here. In contrast, the Earl of Mar had at least 1,500 men.
I thought he was going to say 15.
No. No.
Well, that's not enough.
It's not great.
No.
So it is Helm's Deep.
It is big time Helm's Deep.
So what do you think happened, Kieran, when the Lord of the Isles came to blows with the Earl of Mar?
Did he have a pop? Did he try and defend with his 1,500 men? I want to say it's an underdog situation and he won, but it seems unlikely.
That is exactly what happened.
Ooh.
So here's how Historic UK described it.
Okay.
Holding his knights as cavalry reserve, Mar organised his spearmen into battle formation to face the advancing islanders near the town of Inverurie on the morning of 24th of July, 1411.
Mm-hmm.
The islanders launched charge after charge against the close-packed ranks of Mar's spearmen, but failed to break their ranks. Meanwhile, Mar led his cavalry into the main body of Donald's army, where the islanders thrust their dirks into the soft underbellies of the horses, stabbing the knights as they fell. By nightfall, the dead littered the field. Exhausted, Mar and the survivors of his army rested and waited for the battle to resume the following morning. With the dawn, they found that Donald had left the field, retreating back to the Isles.
Oh my days.
The heavy losses suffered by both sides meant that neither side could claim the day. However, Mar had successfully defended Aberdeen.
God damn. That is a David and Goliath-esque story.
Mm-hmm.
Damn.
So, brutal losses on both sides.
Yeah, not a good victory, but they didn't lose.
Well, Donald didn't gain territory in
Yeah.
Murray and out towards Aberdeen. He didn't get what he came for.
That's fair play.
But the reason I bring that up was the Battle of Harlaw was fairly close to Crathes Castle, and Robert Burnet fought in this battle on the side of the Earl of Mar.
Oh, okay. It's interesting to know where people are in the kind of pecking order.
Mm-hmm.
So he was there.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I'm not jealous, even if they did win.
All right, well, to put it into context for you, he's fighting against the evil Lord of the Isles on the side of the king, with the Earl of Mar as his commander.
Yep. He's Aragorn.
I mean, I would wager a bet that he's fighting to make sure that the Lord of the Isles doesn't take his land.
Yeah, I mean...
If he owns the land around Crathes and the battle is happening fairly close by, you're going to make sure you don't lose anything.
Well, these people never stop. No one's ever invaded enough. I'm gone yeah, that's plenty. I'm happy. I only just wanted this little piece. That's me. I'm good.
No one's ever gone, let's keep this fair.
Yeah, right.
I could take more, but I won't.
I won't. I just want my little slice here, and I'm full. I'm happy. So, yeah, you would want to defend your home.
Yeah, and that's why I bring it up.
Mm-hmm.
He was fighting for his homeland. Robert's son John was the first of the Burnets to be referred to as Burnet of Lays, which was very useful for me because there are about 1 billion different strands of the Burnet family.
Oh, really?
So many. They went everywhere and they each had their own branch and it's very difficult to keep track of. So knowing that the ones at Crathes were Burnets of Lays, so much easier.
Yep.
John apparently fought for King James I, who was the James who had a murdered older brother, got abducted by pirates, and was ultimately assassinated in a sewer.
Yep.
That king.
That unfortunate soul.
Yeah. I couldn't make that up.
I know, it doesn't... If I hadn't been listening to this podcast as long as I had, I wouldn't believe you.
I mean, you say that. Are you listening?
Yes.
Yes, so John fought for James I, and it was John's son Alexander who took over the title when he died. He became Alexander Burnet of Lays.
Okay.
I'll do my best to make sure you keep up here, but it is a bit confusing because they all have the same name.
Yes.
I read that Alexander was Baron at Lays during the reigns of James II, James III, and James IV.
Oh, that's a good effort.
Which didn't sound right, but then I checked the dates. James II was king between 1437 and 1460.
That's a long time.
James III, 1460 to 1488.
Mm-hmm.
And then James IV, 1488 to 1513. So it does actually work out. You could be present between 1460 and 1513
Yeah,
to
you
see
could,
them all.
couldn't you? Just seems wild.
But yeah, when I read it, I was like, no, like that's wrong. But he saw through 3 kings.
Yeah, fair play. Because he might have just seen the end of one and the start of the last one. That's good going for 1500s.
Right.
Uses this one weird trick to defy the aging.
Doctors hate him.
Live in a crannig.
Alexander was rewarded by James III for fighting for him.
Mm-hmm.
James III gave him Banchory,
Oh, that was nice of him.
the town. That was his now.
Yep.
And then James III was murdered a few months after that.
Ooh.
It's a dangerous business being a king.
Yep. Hope we got the paperwork through.
So Alexander I of Lays died in 1505.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of his younger sons, one of the ones that wasn't sent to inherit, that went on to become Canon Burnett of St. Macher's Cathedral.
Ooh.
Which ended up being very important to the future of the Burnetts, even though he wasn't set to inherit.
Okay.
A canon is a kind of religious leader in the Catholic Church. We've been here before. I find it very confusing to explain the inner workings of the Catholic Church. But it basically meant that Canon Burnett would have been living close to St. Macher's Cathedral, in a manse, basically, devoting his whole life to the church. Beautiful cathedral, by the way. It's in Aberdeen. You can still go and visit. It's stunning. But we need to talk about Canon Burnett because he's part of the reason that the Burnetts became so wealthy.
Interesting.
Doesn't sound great for the church.
Not for a man of the cloth.
No, but it's the truth. Canon Burnett served with a man called Canon Hamilton.
Okay.
I believe that one of the rules of serving as a canon is that you are required to be celibate.
Mm-hmm.
Canon Hamilton did not observe this rule.
Oh,
He was a very naughty boy.
in the church? I don't believe it.
Well, Hamilton ended up having a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And naturally, he was worried about providing for her because he wasn't supposed to have had her in the first place. But he wanted to make sure she would be okay.
Yep.
This is where Canon Burnett stepped in.
Okay.
Because his brother was Alexander II of Lays. Like I said, he had inherited and everything. So an arrangement was made between Alexander's son, Alexander,
Yep.
Who married Janet Hamilton in 1543.
Interesting.
Ensuring that she, Canon Hamilton's daughter, would be cared for.
Well, that's nice.
And her dowry was a pretty massive chunk of church land
Of church land?
that was now in the Burnett family.
Well, that's a bit cheeky, isn't it? Because I assumed he needed to have her taken care of because he's a man of the church, so he doesn't make a big wage, if any wage at all, because he'll have like accommodation provided for and things.
Well, he's committed to the church, so he can't commit himself to raising a daughter.
Yep. Well, that's that's pretty good going.
So the Burnetts got a whole bunch of land
Whole bunch of land.
because they agreed to marry Alexander III of Lays
Man,
to Janet Hamilton.
good work.
So I hope that makes sense. I know it's kind of roundabout.
Nope, that makes sense.
So Canon Burnett organised her marriage to his nephew.
We always wonder what the non-inheriting sons do, because the daughters tend to get married off. So that's interesting, joining the church as an
Well,
option.
certainly later, usually they join the army.
It was typically army, wasn't it?
We've talked about that a lot. Or the forces, I guess.
Yeah. Interesting.
After their marriage, Janet and her new husband were granted even more church land
More church land?
by Archbishop Beaton.
Ooh. Why so?
Just because he was friends with Canon Hamilton, so he gave them more land. And this is the same Archbishop Cardinal Beaton who was murdered in 1546 for being corrupt.
Well.
By, I think it was John Knox and others. He was murdered, but that's a story for another time.
Yep. Well, that's an unusual way to get rich.
Mm-hmm.
No corrupt church officials. I don't know any church officials. I can't make that work for me at all.
So yeah, the Burnets did quite well out of this arrangement. They got lots more land.
Yes, they did.
They were sitting pretty. So it was this Alexander that started work on Crathes Castle. The one who married Janet.
Oh, well, as I said earlier, very expensive to build a castle.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And we're in the 1500s now.
We're in prime castle time. Okay, well, he's done pretty well for himself, hasn't he?
Mm-hmm. And a major part of the reason, I think, was he and Janet had 6 children together.
Okay.
So they needed the space.
Yep.
They had lots of children.
They need the space. If they're going to try and have any more children, you definitely don't want your 6 kids living in your bedroom.
Right. Don't need that.
Don't need that.
Don't need that.
Mm-mm.
I also read that the Burnet family motto changed around this time.
Oh.
It had been strength draws vigor from an injury, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
It changed to who can be his would not be another's.
That's very vague. Who can be his cannot... What?
Who can be his would not be another's.
Be...
So why would you pick anyone else if you could have him? Like a Burnet.
Ah, I see. I prefer their first one.
Really? I think the second one's kind of romantic.
Yeah, you think?
Both very cool.
Both very cool. I thought it was going to be he who favors the church will be rewarded or something.
No. You can't just say that. Work started on Crathes in 1553, although I read somewhere it said 1560, but it says 1553 in the guidebook from Crathes.
They would know.
So I'm going with that.
Mm-hmm.
But the work didn't finish for another 40 years.
It's always so long.
40 years.
I mean, I don't know how to build a castle, so it'd probably take me longer than 40 years, but still.
Such a long time.
Such a long time.
In the middle of construction, Alexander was called to fight in the conflict that was happening between Mary, Queen of Scots, and the Earl of Huntly, which we've talked about before.
Mm-hmm.
That put a stop to all building work at the time.
Yeah, that would make it trickier.
Alexander was on the side of the Queen, under the command of the Earl of Murray, who was Mary's half-brother.
Mm-hmm.
Gordon, the Earl of Huntly, was upset at losing land and power because of Mary, and he spat the dummy.
It's got to happen.
Basically. We've talked about it in more depth. I forget which episode it was, because they were in Inverness at one point as they were fighting each other. I forget.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know if it was the Mary, Queen of Scots episode. It was one of them. It might have been Leith Hall, actually.
Oh, yeah. Similar. They're close by-ish, so it makes sense they're in the same conflict.
Doesn't hugely matter. It's just sticking in my head.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Earl of Huntly spat the dummy and wants what he thinks is his.
Yeah.
They came to blows at Corrichie, which I'm probably saying wrong. It's Corrichie. Do let me know. But they came to blows there on the 28th of October, 1562.
I mean, that happens to be one of my favourite days of the year.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
National holiday.
National holiday, because it's Eilidh's birthday.
Corrichie's near Aberdeen, so that was where the two forces met, and the Queen's forces won.
Mm-hmm.
Huntly actually lost so badly that he supposedly died from the shock of the battle.
Wow. Not wounds?
No, records show he died of apoplexy.
Mm-hmm.
Apoplexy. After he was captured by Mary's forces. And he was only 47.
Wow.
According to Wikipedia, apoplexy, quote, formerly referred to what is now called a hemorrhagic stroke, which is the result of a ruptured blood vessel in the brain, unquote. So nowadays it would be like cerebral bleeding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he died.
Wow. That's intense, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. That's a bad defeat.
That is a bad defeat. I'm always aware of it whenever we're talking about, like, the Burnets. I was like, oh, the king gifted them this land. I'm like, who did he take it from? Because it's not always his or hers when he gifts it.
Scotland's not that big.
No.
You can't just keep producing more land.
Yep. So it always makes sense to me when you hear that somebody spits the dummy and goes, no, that was mine. You can't just take it and give it to my enemy / neighbour.
So again, the Burnets are on the winning team.
Mm-hmm.
which is usually how you get one family that's been in power for such a long time.
Yeah, they're usually good at picking winners.
The castle itself, Crathes Castle, was finished in 1596, a long time after it was started.
Yeah.
From what I saw, it was Alexander's great-grandson that finally moved into the place when it was done.
Damn, not even his kids.
No. I think they might have been living in parts of it, but it was his great-grandson that moved into the completed castle.
Yeah, he cut the ribbon, so to speak.
But there were the 2 generations in between. They died surprisingly young, so that does also come into play.
Oh, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
This great-grandson was also called Alexander. He was the 12th laird total that we've talked about so far. I'm not talking about every single one of them. I'm just kind of picking my faves.
Yep.
And I think he was the one responsible for a lot of the really beautiful detail that you see in the castle today, like the paintings on the ceiling. I think this was because of him.
Oh, we like him then, because it is a very beautiful castle to walk around.
It's incredible. The wooden ceilings, there's just the most beautiful paintings along all of the beams, and they've been really well cared for, so they're super bright, super vibrant. You can really see all of the detail.
Yeah.
I think he's the one who had that done.
Yeah, we like that.
I believe.
Mm-hmm.
There's also some pieces of furniture that are carved with dates from the late 1500s, which belong to Alexander's wife, Catherine,
Okay.
that are still in the castle,
Wow,
which is pretty cool.
that is really cool. So it's quite new then, as far as castles go.
Reasonably, yeah. It's not the usual where there's the tower house and then it's changed. It was built a bit later. It has changed over time, because that's what happens. It changes depending on the family's needs, but yeah, it was built a little bit later than ones we've talked about before.
Yeah.
Alexander the 12th seems to have been a pretty good guy. He gave money to the poor. He built a church in Enquiries. Usually he had lots of very well-connected friends. All that stuff. Everything you would expect. And after Alexander came Thomas.
Not Alexander?
No.
Oh.
Thomas, who was the first Baronet of Leys.
Okay.
So there's differing titles before now, but he's the first Baronet.
Got you.
Because he was granted a baronetcy in Nova Scotia, which is something we've discussed before.
Oh, yes.
It's an odd one, but Scottish nobles were just made barons of land in Canada that they never visited, never saw, never actually had any control over at all. But it's that thing we were just talking about, that there's a limited amount of land in Scotland. So if the monarch wanted to favour someone to make them this title, they needed land that they had to own.
Yep.
So they were just given land in Canada. Which is further proof that it all means nothing. It's all arbitrary. It literally means nothing.
Literally means nothing.
Because they never went to Canada. They never saw it. Ever.
No. Weirdest thing. I remember for my dad's birthday one year, I got him one of those... He became like a lord, I think. He became Lord John, as there are many before him, because I bought him like a 1 by 1 square foot of land in somewhere that made him officially like a landowner. I think it was all nonsense, but it was like a fun joke gift, and he got a certificate with his name on it.
As far as gag gifts go, it was pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I think it was worth what you paid for the joke. But I think it is a racket.
But it's not that dissimilar though. It's like, oh yeah, there's this bit in Canada that you're the lord of, or baronet of, I should say.
But it's everything that comes with the title that they care about. They don't care about the land.
No.
Even a little bit. It's everything that comes with it.
So dumb.
So Thomas was one of these barons.
Yep.
Or baronets, sorry. He was one of these baronets.
Yeah, just like a little baron.
Thomas was also a covenanter, but not one of the ones that ended up dead.
Good for him.
He seemed to play the game quite well.
Well, yeah, even when you pick the losing side, you come out, at least not at the bottom, if not on top.
That took a minute.
Does it make sense?
I think so. I'm very tired. Thomas was close with the Marquess of Montrose, who we've talked about a lot before. He was also a covenanter at the time, but flipped eventually and became a royalist.
Ooh, cheeky.
Before the end. Eventually, Thomas kind of flipped too, because he felt that the covenanters and their cause had gone too far. Because he still respected that the king was the authority. And he didn't agree with their rebellion, even though he agreed with their cause.
That's interesting.
So he believed the same things that they did, but he didn't think they acted about it in the right way.
Yeah, maybe he would have favoured more of like a vote as an ousting, so to speak.
I guess, or just that he kind of had it in his head as, oh, well, no, this is the way things are. The king has authority.
Mhm.
He can't get past that. So Thomas offered up money and supplies to Montrose's efforts, so was protected by him in the conflict that followed.
Ah, there we go.
So he was a Covenanter, but he helped support the Royalists because he and Montrose were pretty tight.
That is a good way to play the game.
It's very confusing to read about and try to explain to you, though, because you're looking at both sides. Like, what?
What are you doing?
This doesn't make any sense.
Pick a side. Strange.
Yeah. So even though he was technically a Covenanter, not a Royalist,
Mhm.
he was on the opposing team to Montrose, but they got on really well.
Hmm.
And Montrose protected him.
Well, it's just how you play the game.
Right, it's so confusing.
So confusing.
In 1644, during the conflict, Montrose actually camped outside Crathes with his men.
Okay.
Thomas just didn't stand against him. He just didn't offer any resistance.
Mhm.
He allowed Montrose's forces to stay there because they were on their way further north at the time. And Thomas and Montrose had dinner together.
I was just thinking about they just had a nice pally catch up.
Yeah, it was very civil, very peaceful. They just hung out. And it says in the guidebook that this is, quote, the nearest Crathes ever came to a siege, unquote. Which I thought was quite funny.
That is quite funny. I never put it together. It hadn't, as we were walking around and reading the information and stuff, it had never been sieged, has it?
No.
I think you hear castle, you assume castle warfare.
Oh, I think because the Burnets were always on the winning side.
Yeah.
So no one really got near them.
Never needed to. Fair play?
Thomas kind of carried on skirting the line between Royalist and Covenanter in what I think is a pretty masterful display of self-preservation. Just doing what's going to keep him alive. So he wasn't killed in battle. He wasn't executed. He did pretty well as far as Covenanters and Civil War goes, I think.
Yep.
He died in 1653.
Okay, so like a wee bit after. But he neither had to give up his life or his beliefs.
Nope. Or his property or anything like that.
And the money he gave was to his friend, so presumably that wasn't begrudging or coerced or anything.
There's other bits and pieces that he got in touch with the King Charles about money and not having to give up men as soldiers. There's all kinds of things, but I really don't want to get bogged down in it.
No, fair enough.
It's confusing. Just wanted to give you a little flavour of who Thomas was and what he was up to. Now, looking at the family tree of the Burnets, Thomas's son and grandson both died young.
Okay.
Thomas's son died when he was only a child. And then he had a grandson who was next to inherit, but he died when he was only 26. This is from a different child, obviously. However, by the time that this grandson died, he was 26. He'd already had 6 children.
6 children?
Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry, his wife had 6 children.
He'd had cigars in the waiting room.
He'd have fuck all. 6 kids. So there was no question over an heir.
No. Oh, well.
When he died at 26.
To be fair, the fucking was the only part he did.
Seems like it. The 3rd baronet, so we had... was also called Thomas.
I see.
Obviously.
Yep.
And I read that he and his wife had 21 children in 22 years.
Oh my God. That's horrendous. It feels weird to say, but that is horrendous.
21 children in 22 years. Poor Margaret.
I know.
That's all I'll say.
Was she bedridden?
Poor Margaret.
Or just ridden in the bed?
No. Isn't that mental?
That is mental. That is unbelievable.
And she did all that, and she outlived him by about 30 years.
30 years?
Well deserved, I should think. She should get some bloody peace.
I mean, if she can do 21 kids in 22 years, you're made of tougher stuff than most.
Wild.
Oh, it's got to sting.
Maybe by about number 15, yeah.
Maybe it'd stop stinging after that.
Oh, I don't want to talk about this. I just don't want to. This Thomas, of Thomas and Margaret, was one of the few Scottish MPs of the time who didn't support the Act of Union in 1707.
Oh, wow.
He didn't want the union of the crowns, when most of them did at the time. And he had a brother who was killed in a duel down in London.
Oh.
I don't know why, I don't know how. I think it was near Marylebone. Marylebone?
No idea.
Near there. And Major William Burnett.
Wow.
I don't know what he did, but he died.
It only ever pops up briefly that there were duels, and I'm always surprised every single time. Because in my head, they're like Wild West thing. Like if I think there's a duel happening, there's cowboy hats, there's spurs, there's a desert with a tumbleweed going past. That's where duels happen.
Well, I think typically if a duel was carried out then, it was more of a show thing. Like you would use it to resolve a dispute that you would both fire at each other, but you would deliberately miss.
You kind of aim up, wouldn't you?
Just to have the thing settled, that you both showed up. Okay, it's done now.
Ooh, a dangerous game, because I bet it was never discussed that it was a show. You just both be annoyed but kind of silently agree to miss on purpose.
Well, I mean, Major William Burnett didn't do so well.
Nope. But then maybe guns were so inaccurate that you could be like aiming well to the right and the bullet just flies left.
Maybe they're both drunk.
Maybe they're both drunk. Who can say?
Could be anything.
Always surprising.
So Thomas's son inherited when Thomas died, and he became Alexander, the 4th Baronet.
Back to Xander.
Yes. I hope this is making sense. I'm trying to sort of keep us on track.
I mean, it's a nice change to having endless Johns.
The most significant thing about him historically is that he didn't take part in the 1715 or the 1745 risings.
Oh, he managed just to not get involved.
Kind of, yeah. He didn't join the Jacobites. I don't know if he was completely against them, but again, the Burnets are holding on to their land, their property, their cash, because they aren't on the losing team.
Yep, fair play.
So they managed it through the Reformation and then the Civil War, and now again during the Rising.
Oh, and it's so unusual when they have opposed things that have then come into being, such as the Union of the Crowns. Because normally if you're against, you just get flattened and removed.
But he's against it in Parliament, not rebellion.
That's true.
You can have an opinion in Parliament, but ultimately the Act of Union did go ahead.
Yeah, and I guess they just had to go with it. Well, they obviously had to go with it.
Now, I didn't realise this. It was only in my research for this episode that I came across it on a website all about the Burnett family history. But one of the code names that was used for Bonnie Prince Charlie during 1745 was Mr. Burnett.
Really? That's interesting.
Apparently. So I wonder how the actual Burnetts felt if that came out, since they hadn't joined him.
No.
But that was one of his code names that was used in like ciphers and things.
Oh. Maybe that made it slightly easier because they knew there was no Mr. Burnett in the Jacobites. So if you were a Jacobite and you said Mr. Burnett,
yeah, but then surely it completely highlights, well, they don't belong. So
oh, that's true.
That's not supposed to be there. That's obviously something important.
Good point. That's why you'd be a better code breaker than I am.
Because I'm sneaky.
Yes. Oh, here's the code. A = 1, B = 2, etc. They'll never get it. I'm a genius.
Alexander, the baronet I was just telling you about, was the one who first tried to drain the loch that we talked about earlier.
Okay.
Remember the Crannog, the family home? It was still there, but it was in the loch. It had been left.
Okay, yep.
So Alexander wanted to drain the loch and see if they could get to it.
Oh, cool.
He did this around 1746. So I think just when the Rising was over. This is what he's doing.
Oh, I see. I want to be mad. I'm like, what? There was all this like heartbreak and disaster and he was there playing in the loch. But that's got Kieran written all over it, doesn't it? So I can't be that upset.
Yeah.
Oh, is that
I
all?
can't even argue with you.
Did you read about the news? No, I didn't. I want to see if I can get that Crannog out of that loch. Anyone want to help? No. Oh. Okay.
So this is 1746. I read in the Crathes guidebook that money was a bit tight for Alexander at this time, and that was one of the reasons for him trying to uncover the Crannog, apparently.
Check it for gold?
I thought, or maybe just recovering materials or trying to rebuild. I'm not entirely sure. But that was the motivation. However, tragedy struck.
Oh no.
Alexander's son was helping him with this effort as they were draining the loch. He was on site while they were trying to do it. And during the work, his son was killed, quote, by a splinter of rock during the operation, unquote.
Ooh, that doesn't sound pleasant.
A pretty terrible way to go.
Yeah. Oh, what do you think that means?
I'm assuming just a rock just got sent flying and went into him.
Clonked him in the head, maybe. That is a tragic accident.
Mm-hmm.
That was the correct choice of word.
Right? During all of this labour happening.
Oh, man. Well, that's a shame.
This had a pretty big impact on Alexander, as you would expect.
Yes.
And is something we're going to come back to a little bit in our spooky stuff.
Oh, okay.
At the latter half of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
So bear that in mind.
Put a little piece of rock in that for later.
Oh, Kieran. Oh. So yes, we're gonna come back to Alexander, who lost his son later.
So presumably that's why he then gave up trying to drain the loch.
Well, I think he did manage it.
Oh yeah?
I believe.
Very good. How do you drain a loch?
I don't know.
Eilidh?
I don't know.
Okay, well, I'm interested. I'll look that up in my own time.
I have 30 pages of script that is lovingly researched.
Mm-hmm. You detailed me how to use a pit to make a lunar clock, and I'm over here just like, how do you drain a loch? Do you think it's a coincidence they rhyme? Because I do. A big bucket chain. Eilidh's despairing for anyone who can't see her face right now.
So everyone.
Oh, I think about everyone's despairing.
No one can see me. It's just you and I.
Yep.
Alexander's second son inherited after the death of his older brother.
Yes.
After this accident. But then he died just a year after his father did.
Oh no.
Which left everything in a bit of a mess.
Mm-hmm.
Because then who's going to inherit? Somehow the Burnets have gone from producing 21 children in a generation to having no one to inherit.
Oh. Well, that's tricky. Also makes sense why there were so many Burnets.
Yes, this is how it happened.
You were talking about all the different, like, I was going to say strains, threads, families.
Strains of a virus.
Yeah, I know. They seemed quite pleasant so far. We've definitely heard of worse families in the podcast.
Well, I think some of them sprung up earlier because it was fairly common for them to have like 5 or 6 children.
Yes.
Who would then marry into different families and, that's how it happens.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a very big family.
Yeah, 21. Mental.
Right? The second son's death led to a lot of falling out and fighting over who would become the big man, basically.
Well, there's a lot of Burnets left over being like, I'm next in line, aren't there?
Yes. So there was a lot of Rammies after this.
Mm-hmm.
This is from the Crathes guidebook. In 1759, the 5th Baronet died a bachelor, and there ensued a 7-year quarrel between 2 rival Burnet cousins for possession of the castle. One managed to get away with the castle key after the cousin's funeral, but it was their rival, Thomas Burnet of Criggy, who eventually won the long legal battle for the title and the castle.
Of course, we're into the 1700s now, so it is a legal battle rather than a war.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack there, because I think it's pretty petty to just steal the key and be like, bye now.
So I would like to invoke the law of finders keepers.
Yeah, I've got it. It's mine. I made the effort to steal it at my cousin's funeral.
Yep.
Because there's not other more important things happening right now.
Oh, that is the kind of thing I imagine when there is this, at this kind of like power level of family, that when there's a death, there's almost no time to be sad because there's a power struggle happening instead of grieving. It's
a shame because it's just because there's lots of money on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sad.
It is. Very sad.
Yeah, he just stole the key to the castle.
I mean, it's a bold take.
And then didn't get to keep it.
Man. He was no Hagrid.
No, he was not.
So he wasn't keeper of the keys. I have to say it.
Thomas Burnet of Criggy was the nephew of Alexander, who we talked about.
Okay.
So he was the cousin of Alexander's son, who had died the year after him.
Was it some? Yes.
I know it's confusing. You can let it kind of wash over you if you like.
Yeah, I'm glad you've spared us the details of the legal battle.
Yes. It's quite a lot of just admin have spared you this episode.
At one point, me and Ailey were out at a cafe doing some work, Highland Way in Nairn, for a wee shout out. And I looked over at Ailey's laptop, and she was opening up a document from the 1901 detailing the family tree of the Burnetts, just scrolling through these like page-long paragraphs. I chose to look away again. I was like, whew, I'll wait for the abridged version.
That's what I do. That's my whole job.
Yeah.
So Thomas Burnet of Criggy became the 6th Baronet. You don't need to pay attention to what happened before. That's where we've ended up.
That's where we've landed.
Now, his son actually fought in America
Okay.
during the Revolutionary War. He fought as part of John Burgoyne's army and was captured at the Battle of Saratoga, which is in New York State.
Cool.
Or one of the battles of Saratoga. I think there were a couple.
Mm-hmm. So he was on the side of the British.
I was literally just about to say that. That's my next sentence. I just had to itch my eye.
I'm just too smart and witty.
Yes, dear. So basically the British forces came down from Canada to try and take New York from the rebels.
Oh, okay.
But they didn't. They lost. Robert, Thomas's son, was captured and then released. So he came home and he eventually became the 7th Baronet. So he did fine out of it all.
Yeah.
He went to war, came home, got a castle, golden.
Easy peasy.
I think Robert's brother fought in the Battle of San Juan in 1797 in Puerto Rico.
Okay.
Which also didn't end well for the British. They had to make a run for it.
Those hecking Brits.
Well, see if they just stopped getting in other people's business. They have no business being involved in.
Well, yeah, it's hard to be mad when they've invaded and now they're being expelled.
Yeah, see if you weren't there. No problem.
Shouldn't have been there in the first place.
An interesting figure in Burnet family history who didn't directly inherit or anything, but I still want to mention, is James Burnet, who became known as Lord Monboddo.
Monboddo?
Because he lived at Monboddo House.
Okay.
So it's like a courtesy title. He was a judge and a scientist, a very smart cookie. But he's known because he started looking into and figuring out natural selection, like Charles Darwin's theory, before Darwin did it.
Wow. That's interesting.
Quote, some credit him with anticipating in principle the idea of natural selection that was read by and acknowledged in the writings of Erasmus Darwin. Charles Darwin read the works of his grandfather, Erasmus, and later developed the ideas into a scientific theory, unquote.
That's so interesting.
So there's a connection, but James didn't take it all the way like Darwin did.
Yeah.
But he made the connection. He looked at the relationship between man and apes, in particular orangutans, and seems like he was skirting around natural selection long before Charles Darwin got there.
That is fascinating. I think there's so often these little like hints where like Charles Darwin still did all the work, but he didn't create the idea from nothing. There's always something prior.
We can kind of tell that Monboddo was like kind of before his time because he could see that there was a link and he was trying to suggest that there was some kind of connection, and people thought he was like nuts. They're looking at this book that he wrote about it just like it's a novelty.
Yeah.
But I read in the guidebook of Crathes that he also fully believed in mermaids.
Ooh.
So, but it's interesting because he's at that tipping point, I think, in history, which I think is fascinating between fact and fiction, that they kind of bleed into one another.
Yeah, the sort of the scientific method hasn't been like nailed down.
Well, because people are looking at his opinions on mermaids and equating that with what he has to say about the connection between man and ape. To them, this is the same level of insanity.
Yeah, these are or truth.
Yes. He wasn't treated as if they were truth.
No.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, fascinating. And then he was a judge and a scientist.
Yes.
That's what, well, is really interesting.
But he was also a bit of an odd crater, as well as being a judge and a scientist. So he was very clever, but he was odd. I took a picture of one of the info plaques at Crathes about Monboddo, and I'm going to read it to you now.
Okay.
And I want to know what you think. A respected judge and something of an eccentric, his reputation was in part fostered by his published philosophy, but was aided and abetted by his character and habits. He preferred to ride rather than travel in a carriage, maintaining that it was undignified to ride behind the backside of a horse.
I mean, that's valid.
Right? Think about this next bit.
Mm-hmm.
He kept a pig as a pet,
Okay.
taking it for walks, sitting facing backwards on his horse, with the pig on a lead behind.
I was with him, but we're departing. The train has left the station.
Obsessed with daily habits and exercise, he would take air baths, standing naked in front of an open window at all times of the year, and then anointing himself with his own fragrant mixtures.
Unusual. Not totally, cold therapy's all the rage today.
So see, he was odd, and people marked that he was different.
Yes. It's the kind of reputation I want to have when I'm older.
Oh yeah.
Mad eccentric.
You're already there, aren't you?
Well, it's not for me to say. You can totally hear it with the pig as a pet. With they're actually far more intelligent than dogs are. Like, yeah, but it's a pig, mate. Like,
But what I find interesting is that with his habits and with his book, you can see the same thing. It's like there is sense there. There is something that makes, like the cold therapy and that pigs are super intelligent.
Yep.
Like, you can see the sense in it. He's just not fully understood.
Yeah. He's gone out with societal norms. So it's almost when you get like highly logical people. So like, no, that just makes sense. Why would I do that? Like, oh, well, it's a kind of societal norm, but it doesn't make sense. So pigs are much tidier than dogs are. For instance.
I mean, a pig would be less hairy than the dog that's at your feet, let me tell you.
That was going to be my next statement. Potentially less cleanup if you can house train a pig, which if they're very clever, you'd be able to do.
So he was an odd creator.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see the logic in some of what he thought and what he did. His daughter Elizabeth was very well known in Edinburgh society because she was a beauty. Robert Burns thought so. He wrote about her,
Ooh.
I think, twice.
Very nice.
But she died when she was only 24. She died of TB. Because we're at that time in history.
Yep. Not just out of embarrassment at her dad's naked air baths.
No. Doesn't seem like it. No. So Monboddo didn't inherit Crathes or anything, but I just wanted to bring him up because I thought that was really cool.
Super interesting. And I'm sure almost the bane of the family, if you are the Burnett who owns the castle and stuff. And they're just like, is your cousin Lord Monboddo? Was it?
Monboddo.
Is your cousin Lord Monboddo? He's just like, yeah.
So we had Robert come back from war in America to become the 7th Baronet, if you remember. I took us on a little tangent. We're coming back to him.
Why did I just get a picture in my head of every baronet fitting into another baronet like Russian dolls? Not related. Please
I wonder
continue.
if we could make a set of those, but it's all the Scottish kings and queens.
Yeah, it's just boop, 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 boop.
Robert had 4 sons, and this was so confusing. Looking at the family tree, trying to figure this out. So even though I had the family tree in front of me, I might have this wrong.
Mm-hmm.
He had 4 sons, and I believe at least 3 of them were the baronet at one time.
Really?
Yeah, after inheriting it from the brother before.
Oh, man.
But I can't tell if it was just 3 of them or 4 of them.
Okay.
Because the way that the family tree's laid out, it's not clear whether one of them is Robert's son or his grandson.
Ah, I see.
It was so confusing. And it was yesterday when I was working on it, I spent at least 20 minutes just looking at it, trying to figure it out, writing this one way, going back. No, that's not...
Is the family tree, was that in the guidebook?
Yes.
Because I saw Eilidh squinting. Once again, it was a huge family tree printed on a fairly small page. And I again chose to just look away and just went, oh, that's not me.
I know, I just get left to sit in it.
Yeah, I think your eyes are better than mine, to be fair.
Wrangle with it. So, yeah, I could have this wrong, but I believe Robert's grandson, by his youngest son, because he's the only one that was still, living, he had inherited, he became the baronet after all his brothers died. Then when he died, his son inherited.
Okay, yes.
Who was also called Robert. But if I'm wrong, if you know how this actually went, please feel free to let me know. I'm always happy to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're smarter than me and you can figure it out, I would love to hear from you.
Love to hear all about it. I'm always surprised there's not like a Baronet Alexander, who had 4 sons who he all names Alexander. I'm surprised that doesn't come up more often.
Just to make sure.
Yeah. Or like, oh yeah, Robert and his 4 sons, Robert, and Roberto.
I have come across it that sometimes it's usually wealthy titled parents say they had their first son called Robert, but he died and then they had more children. They might name a later son Robert. I've seen that happen before.
Ooh, no. Oh no.
And multiple times,
Wow.
not just an anomaly.
Ooh. Because it must be quite, I don't know if you would feel if you were named after your parent, kind of like your name is not your own because it was theirs and they gave it to you. But if your name was also your older siblings who died, that wouldn't feel good.
Especially parents who have lost a firstborn son.
Yep. Don't like that.
I've seen that happen.
Oh no.
So Robert's grandson inherited, as far as I can tell, and he was called Robert. He became the heir after everything, but he wasn't actually living in Scotland when he inherited.
Oh wow.
Would you like to guess where he was?
He lived in Pennsylvania.
Interesting guess.
Just first thing that comes to mind.
Okay. He had emigrated to California.
Oh,
so you weren't that far off.
I was in the right vein.
You were in the Midwest. You just needed to go a little bit further. Yeah, he had moved to California. This is the mid to late 1800s.
Got you.
By the way. And he was a rancher out there because he wasn't the eldest son, I don't think. Or he wasn't the eldest son of an eldest son, so...
Well, yeah, you would not expect to be inheriting if you had 3 uncles above your dad.
So he's gone off and he started his own life. He married an American woman called Matilda Murphy. And they had a son together called James. They made a lot of money ranching. They were extremely wealthy.
Very good.
But eventually sold all of their land for a massive profit.
Fair play.
Now, this is going to sound kind of like those people that say that, oh, if only I'd stayed invested in Google, I'd be a millionaire kind of thing.
I think I know where this is going.
If Robert had just held on 200 years, because he could do that.
Easy.
He would have been one of the wealthiest people alive because the land that he owned is now, quote, half the site of modern Los Angeles.
Oh, wow.
Unquote.
Oh, I was expecting Gold Rush.
Right, yeah. You're completely on the money there. No, it's now LA.
Damn.
And he owned half of it.
Oh, that's wild.
Isn't it? And he was a rancher.
Yep. Crazy. I remember talking to somebody who was telling me, and I believe them, that they bought some Bitcoin when it was $10 a coin. And then they sold it again when it was $18 a coin, and they were absolutely delighted.
Which is totally valid.
Totally valid.
That's smart.
So now that it's, I don't know, $10,000 a coin or something stupid.
But you never know.
Well, that's just it.
You never know that.
With hindsight, it's like, oh my God, can you imagine? But he was very much like, no, we couldn't imagine. Nobody imagined. I thought it was a joke investment, I made some money. I was delighted.
To double your money on a joke investment.
Right?
You take what you can get and be happy with it, I think.
For a Bitcoin.
And you're busy being like, Eilidh, how do you train loss? You're not prepared for the episode.
That's me. That's what I sound like.
Yeah.
That's actually me talking right there.
I mean, they could tell. You don't need to tell them.
I know. Well, that's just it.
So Robert and Matilda returned to Scotland because he was now the heir to the baronetcy, so they were coming home.
Of course, he didn't do badly, even though he missed out on owning half of LA.
No, that's why I say it sounds like those people who say, oh, I was, and then if I had just done this... Yeah, they were extremely wealthy. They did very well.
Yeah.
But it's weird to think that it's now LA.
Well, it's weird to think of LA as anything but LA.
And the money that's there now.
Exactly.
Sadly, Robert and Matilda's son died young. There's a lot of that in this episode. I do apologise. And it was Robert's younger brother who inherited after Robert.
Okay.
I appreciate this is confusing.
Feels fine, actually. I'm not.
Okay.
I'm following along nicely. I think because you have all the other information of the family tree in your head, but what's coming out is nice and concise.
I am manning the gates.
To be inside your head in that flood And that just ocean of information swirling in there.
That's why I'm so tired.
You just need wellies in mind. For splashing around in the puddle.
Robert's younger brother was Colonel Thomas Burnet, and he became the 12th Baronet.
Mm-hmm.
He was married to a woman called Mary Cumine, Cumine.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting there. We've made it through 12 baronets now. We're getting towards a more modern time.
Yeah, where are we now?
Well, we're going to spend more time with Colonel Thomas's son than with Colonel Thomas.
Cool.
Because the son was an army man who fought during World War I.
Ah.
And I came across more of his story in an old Press and Journal article that I want to talk to you about because I thought it was interesting.
Yep.
So we're in the early 1900s now.
Cool.
He was called James. He was the 13th Baronet, and he fought for the Gordon Highlanders.
Mm-hmm.
He was an officer, as most men of his ilk were, but it seems like he earned his rank.
Didn't just pay for it.
Mm-hmm. From his career and the kind of reputation he had. He worked for it and fought for it. So really, I want to just read you a bit from the Press and Journal article that I found, because it really pulled me into his story, and I want that feeling for you listening.
Let's do it. The Press and Journal is like a local newspaper.
Yes. Aberdeenshire laird turned Boer War hero who became one of the finest officers to don the uniform of the Gordon Highlanders during World War I.
Mm-hmm.
Major General Sir James Burnet of Leys earned his first mention in dispatches in Africa and went on to collect another 11, not to mention 2 distinguished service orders, before the 1914 to 1918 conflict was over.
Wow.
So if you're mentioned in a dispatch, it's basically reporting back acts of bravery or important things that have happened in conflict. So he's been mentioned a lot.
12 times.
Mm-hmm.
Mental.
However, he never forgot the debt he owed to a young private who searched for him as he lay badly wounded on the battlefield and carried him to safety under fierce German sniper fire in the first weeks of the war.
Wow.
The soldier, James Christie, came to work for him as a chauffeur at his estate on Deeside. So this is at Crathes. Afterwards, and the pair remained lifelong friends.
Wow.
Sir James' grandson, also James, was just 11 when his grandfather died. He said the two men shared a unique bond into old age. And now this is James speaking, his grandson. James Christie saved my grandfather's life, and he never forgot that, he said. Like many of the officers and soldiers in World War I, Sir James' military career spanned 2 centuries, beginning as a second lieutenant in the Gordons in December 1899. He joined the 2nd Battalion in South Africa, where they had been posted since the beginning of the Boer War, and in August 1901, he was with a group of Gordons whose train was derailed in an explosion. Sir James led a party out into the bush to search for the attackers, and was later mentioned in dispatches for his coolness and resource.
Wow.
When the war ended, he sailed for India, where his regiment was stationed. Here he excelled as a drummer and acquired his nickname Maxim, due to his rapid-fire style of speech, which was said to resemble a Maxim machine gun.
That's not an unpleasant nickname.
Well, it's funny because one of the main characters in the novel Rebecca is called Maxim.
Oh, really?
And that's the only time I've heard the name before. He also nurtured a love for the local flora, which would blossom in later life when he and his wife Sybil were laying out the now famous gardens at Crathes Castle.
Oh.
By October 1913, he had been appointed a company commander, and within 20 days of World War I being declared, his battalion was back in Southampton preparing to go to war.
Wow.
On October 29th, during the First Battle of Ypres, he was severely wounded while leading his company in counterattacks near Gevule? Not sure. Private Christie, his servant, or Batman, didn't know that's where that phrase came from, single-handedly carried him to safety, as described by a fellow Gordon.
Wow.
After the successful counterattack, the battalion retired to their own lines, by which time night had fallen. At this point, James Christie realised Captain Burnet was missing. Private Christie made his way back across the battlefield to the point where he last saw his company commander. So he didn't even know he was there.
No.
James Christie had covered almost 3/4 of a mile and was within a stone's throw of the German trenches when he found the wounded officer.
Oh my God.
Captain Burnet spotted a figure on the skyline and, hoping it was a friend, he sounded a distinctive call on his whistle. Private Christie promptly responded when they came under fire from the German trenches. Heaving the wounded officer onto his back, Private Christie returned to the British trenches, still under fire.
Jesus. Oh. I don't think blowing the whistle was a bold choice.
I mean, how else is he going to attract attention?
That's true.
Because if he puts his head up.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to read you. I wanted to kind of put you there for a minute.
That's amazing.
Because I was completely enthralled by that.
And that's so nice. They were just lifelong friends after that.
Yeah, he never forgot it. He knew for the rest of his life that he had saved him.
Yeah. That's intense.
And he was the only one that went back for him. So he went on his own across no man's land, hoping that he would find him somewhere.
Oh my God. I struggle to look at stuff from the war head on because I can't imagine doing that kind of bravery.
Well, it's making that choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's hard to look at because it forces you to reckon with yourself whether you would make a choice like that.
Yeah. And again, I'm not sure if I would. Well, lots of other people didn't. If he was the only one who went back.
Yeah, he was the only one.
Oh.
And saved his life.
Mm-hmm. Unreal.
Now, I read that Sir James' last appointment was, quote, as a general officer commanding 51st Highland Division in June 1931, before retiring in June 1935, unquote.
Mm-hmm.
But I also read that he was a colonel of the Gordon Highlanders between 1939 to 1948. But I don't think he saw action in World War II because he had retired.
Maybe it was either an advisory thing or a ceremonial thing.
I'm not sure. I don't want to be offensive in case he did.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure.
Don't want to say.
But I know that he saw action during the First World War.
Yeah. Oh, and he was spared if he didn't have to see it for a third time, if he was in Boer as well.
So yes, that's Major General James Burnett.
Whoa.
And his very lucky escape.
He sounds like quite a guy. And damn lucky.
Mm-hmm.
As the rest of the Burnetts have been throughout history. They've obviously, they got blessed somewhere.
It seems to me that he must have commanded a hell of a lot of respect.
Yes.
For someone at the rank of a private to go after their senior officer like that.
Mm-hmm. You have to be very charismatic.
And certainly Christie did something incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, more adulation should be put on him for going back. Oh.
Right?
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to just read it to you.
I appreciate it. It's very evocative.
During both the World Wars, while James was off, Crathes Castle was given up to be used as a convalescent home for soldiers recovering, which was pretty common.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about it a lot this season. For some reason, it just seems to come up all the time.
Yeah, it does.
James and his wife Sybil had 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. His eldest son died in 1934, and his second son was killed in action in 1945. So before him, because he died himself in 1953.
Yep.
So he lived through the loss of his 2 sons.
No.
But he still had his daughter. He died in 1953, and he actually left Crathes Castle to the National Trust in 1952.
Oh.
The year before he died.
Not to his daughter?
Well, there's a reason why not.
Okay.
He gave up the castle to the trust, which is why you can now go around and see it. His daughter, Rohays, Rohays, couldn't inherit the title.
Yes.
Because she didn't have a penis.
Yes.
So, because of this, it's that situation again where the title and the land have become separate.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Usually because they don't want a woman to inherit. So the baronetcy of the Burnetts passed to a distant cousin who was living out in Australia. And it was Rohays' son who inherited the estate of Crathes.
Rohays. Okay.
So her son got the estate, but the castle was left to the trust, and the title went to a different cousin.
Interesting.
It all split.
Yep. Wow, very fractured. Imagine being out in Australia and just getting the letter one day, because you wouldn't be expecting it, of course. You're just living your life. You've set up this new life for yourself. But you say, oh, apparently I'm a baronet now. And did you inherit any money? Is it, nope, no money, no land, just I am officially the baronet. Cool. So if I ever go back to the UK, I can go and serve in the House of Lords.
It's lunacy.
So strange.
It's absolute lunacy. When it could all have been solved if they just said, oh yeah, his daughter could inherit. Just
I
the
know.
same as his sons could have.
Simple.
But no.
Done. Easy.
So that was why she didn't get the castle.
Yep. But she got the estate, so her son got the estate. It was in her family.
Yeah, the land was. She had kind of a tough go of it. She had both of her brothers died.
Mm-hmm.
One of them died in the war. And that happened 3 years after her husband had died in the war.
Oh, no.
She remarried eventually. She married Sir Cecil Boyd Rochford.
That's a name.
Who was a pretty famous racehorse trainer.
Oh.
Although I had never heard of him.
Is it famous? I mean, we run a famous Scottish history podcast, so.
No, we do not. He was important enough that the Queen and Prince Philip went to his and Rohé's son's wedding in the 70s.
Well, that's pretty cool.
So he was a big deal in those circles, from
Yep.
what I can see. I saw the photo of the wedding while we were at Crathes, and I just looked at it for ages going, what's going on here? Where's the connection? And it wasn't until I looked at it later, I went, oh, okay.
Yeah, because I was also looking at the photo, and just you're like, oh, that's pretty cool, right? I'm like, oh, is it? Yeah, that's the Queen. I'm like, oh, yeah.
What would you do without me?
Oh, I'd be lost. Absolutely lost.
I read what I think is a pretty funny story about Rohé's when we were at Crathes.
Mm-hmm.
She was a very beautiful woman. And in the 60s, she was approached by After Eight, who make the mint chocolates.
I would say the chocolate company, okay.
Because they were being launched for the first time in 1962. So we have them every year at Christmas, but this was when they were created.
No, just Santa brings them. They've always been around. What are you talking about?
Santa brings them. Okay, well, he started bringing them to people in 1962.
Okay.
At this time, After Eight was owned by the Roundtree Company, who are a company who makes sweets. And they had, as a company, pretty strong links to the Quakers and the Quaker movement.
Interesting.
We don't have a lot of time to get completely into it,
Oh,
but
I so want to. I'll put it with the blether.
it basically means that they subscribe to certain expectations, beliefs, and morals because of their associations with Quakers. After Eight approached Rohé's because they wanted her to model for their advertising campaign to launch the brand. She agreed. This would be great.
They are supposed to be a really sophisticated chocolate.
Yes, and she was a very sophisticated woman, very beautiful woman. The photos that they were going to use were taken at Crathes, and I saw one at the castle, very classy, very elegant, as you'd expect from a sweetie like After Eight. But when the ads actually ran for the first time, Roundtree started receiving complaints because they were too suggestive.
Oh. I saw these photos. They're not suggestive photos.
They're not. But they got one complaint in particular from, quote, the headmistress of a leading girls' private school, unquote, whose complaint basically focused on the fact that they are a Quaker associated company. And the ad that they ran had the byline, the caption that said, no girl should resist temptation. And it was just one too far for this headmistress of a private girls' school. So she felt it should be pulled.
Wow. I have the headmistress from Matilda in my head all of a sudden.
And just that they were immoral for running it.
That's wild.
I thought they looked great.
Yeah.
They were perfectly on brand. It made a lot of sense. But people were unhappy, kicked up a big stink, and the ads all got pulled.
Oh,
completely.
Man.
But Rohé's still got paid £1,000.
Oh, well, that's good.
Which in today's money would be £26,310.
Not bad.
For ads that didn't even run.
Damn. I hope she got like a nice hamper of After Eights as well.
You would hope so, eh? But then what's really kind of funny is that she had all these earnings that she made from these ads. Rohé's bought both of her sons, who were twins, new cars.
Oh.
Very sweet.
Very nice.
Very nice of old mum. Quote, David crashed his car the following day.
The following day?
And Henry wrote his off 1 week later.
Oh, man. Bloody ungrateful kids.
So the whole thing just seems like a non-starter from the beginning.
And I bet she was so excited.
We bought them brand new cars and they both crashed them.
That's...
Within a week.
Oh, God. That's the worst.
The whole debacle just really didn't serve anybody.
Yeah, she's ready to launch her modelling career, but nobody gets to see the ads she was in. Or some people did and they hated them because of what she represented.
I say good on her.
Yeah,
stirring up a little shit, causing a little scandal. Yeah, I thought it was quite funny.
Oh, I think I'm too outraged for it to be funny. Oh, man. What are you going to do?
It was pretty soon after this that there was a pretty bad fire at Crathes in 1966. It burned down a large chunk of the Queen Anne wing.
Okay.
Which had been added onto the castle, I think in the 1800s, which was later restored after the fire. Some of the insurance money from this fire was used to build the Burnetts a new home, which wasn't the castle.
Yes, not very easy to live in a castle.
No, and the National Trust had it by this time.
Oh, of course.
So the Burnetts are living somewhere else. They've built a new place. They aren't living there anymore. Crathes is under the trust.
Yes.
James, the Major General who fought in World War I, he was the last of the Burnet baronets to live at Crathes.
Okay.
The family haven't lived there since the 50s. And it's open to the public now. You can go visit. Highly recommend. Because we did. It was great.
Very enjoyable. Although, if it partially burned down, maybe it's the National not to be trusted. Not even a chuckle. I woke the dog up.
Oh, he's pissed.
He's trying to leave.
Mum, can we bail?
So where did the dog get a bindle from?
But it isn't just all of that lovely history that made us trek out to Aberdeenshire. It was the ghosts.
It's Spooktober after all.
Dog doesn't even want to look at you.
Yeah, that last joke was so bad, the dog has got up from under my desk and gone and sat under Eilidh's desk instead.
Oh.
Now he can't see me.
Yes, this is what you're really here for, the spooky section.
But you need the context.
Crathes is kind of famous for its ghost stories, which is why it's part of my Halloween lineup for this season.
I think it routinely comes up on like most haunted places in Scotland lists, doesn't it?
Yep, all the time. It's very well known. Lots of people talk about the legends associated with it. So I'm excited to get into it with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I asked you earlier to put a little pin in one of the baronets.
Yep, a little stone splinter.
Yes, that baronet.
Mm-hmm.
The one who lost his son in the accident while draining the loch.
Yep.
He was one of the Alexanders. Well, I don't know if it was losing his son that did it, but this Alexander in particular, a big part of his reputation was for having, quote, "boody fear of beasties," unquote. Now, boody fear means a dread of ghosts. Oh,
I did not know there's a word for that. Fantastic.
Me neither. I came across this for the first time when we were at Crathes. No, he was widely known for it. He terrified of ghosts.
Wow.
Absolutely terrified. He had boody fear.
Huh. As someone who doesn't have that, that's crazy to me, that you could be that deathly afraid.
To me, it reads like he had a phobia.
Yeah.
A distinction between just normal wariness or fear to dread.
A full-on phobia of ghosts. I can't, my brain does not comprehend what that even means.
But I don't know if it's because he lost his son. But it was after that happened that he started feeling this way.
Oh. I mean, that's a shame, isn't it?
Yeah, just quite sad.
Any which way.
Crathes is known for two ghosts.
Two ghosts?
Two ghosts. Spoiling you this week. To start with, we have the White Lady.
There's always a lady. I didn't know what colour she'd be today.
The White Lady, who isn't the most well-known spectre of the castle. So we're going to start with her.
Okay.
For her story, we actually have to go back a bit again to the 1500s.
Yep.
Do you remember, ages and ages ago, we were talking about Alexander, who married Janet Hamilton?
Yes.
The canon's daughter.
Of the church, yep.
Yes. that he wasn't supposed to have had.
Mm-hmm.
Well, before Alexander married Janet, or his second wife, who he married after Janet, there was another woman who was in love with young Alexander,
Oh, really?
young Bertha.
Mm-hmm.
They were madly in love, young couple, completely besotted with each other, and they had agreed to marry one another.
Okay.
What did it matter then that Alexander's mother, Agnes, didn't approve of Bertha? What did that matter?
Tends to matter quite a lot in the 1500s.
Didn't bother them, not even one bit.
Because they were in love. That's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, but it turns out it did matter a lot.
It did matter.
You were right. Everything might have been okay if Agnes had only been disapproving.
Yep.
But Agnes was also a meddler.
Oh, no.
She meddled.
Yeah, no one wants a mother-in-law who's a meddler.
No. Agnes definitely was.
So maybe she dodged a bullet. Maybe she's about to get murdered. I'm not sure which.
Maybe she dodged it, maybe she didn't. Who knows?
Who knows? We're going to find out.
Agnes waited for Alexander to leave Crathes on work, whatever. And remember, he was the one who started the castle being built.
Oh,
Or
yes.
At that point in the castle's history.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when Agnes decided to make her move. She invited Bertha to join her for a meal. Welcoming, kind, lovely,
Very nice.
bringing the family together.
Mm-hmm.
But Agnes poisoned her
Oh. It did matter, you guys.
at this meal, pretending that she cared about her and was welcoming her into the family.
That is next level meddling.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Basically because she believed that Bertha would never be good enough for her son.
Yes.
So she hoped that killing Bertha off, he would marry someone more befitting his station.
Which he did. That's the worst part. She was wrong, but she did get what she wanted. Oh, man.
Mm-hmm. So Alexander returned from wherever he had been. And when he discovered that Bertha had died without warning, while staying at Crathes, he was absolutely heartbroken.
As you would be.
He loved her, and she had been stolen away so fast with no indication that anything could be wrong.
Yep.
So he started getting suspicious as to what actually happened because she had been in perfect health.
Does he find out?
Well, thankfully, it didn't take him long to figure out what must have happened because his suspicions immediately fell on his mother, who had made no secret of the fact that she didn't approve of Bertha.
Nope.
He knew she hadn't approved and that she would do anything to preserve the power and prestige of the family.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But he couldn't prove it.
Tricky.
There wasn't much he could do.
Because it is, to a point, just coincidence that she was the last person with her before she died. You know?
However,
Oh.
he didn't have to prove anything.
What, did she confess?
Bertha's parents, grief-stricken, angry, came to Crathes to collect their daughter's body.
Yes.
And hopefully, if they were smart, they were suspicious of Agnes for the duration of their visit.
Yeah.
It was while Bertha's parents were at Crathes that Agnes took a bit of a funny turn.
Interesting.
She started acting very strangely, responded to things no one else could see.
Mm-hmm.
And then her face went completely white, devoid of colour.
Wow.
And she was overtaken with horror. And that was when she started screaming, "She comes! She comes!"
Oh my god.
In front of everyone, Agnes dropped dead
No.
of fright.
Oh my god.
Dead of fear of something that no one else could see. One record I saw showed that she was only about 42.
Oh, I had her much older in my head. Well, that's strange.
So the story is that Bertha came back.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what killed Agnes.
Bertha was pissed.
Yeah.
As you know, you would be.
Mm-hmm.
Is there perhaps still sightings of Bertha in the castle today?
Well, no one's quite sure. Lots of people have reported seeing a white lady wandering between where the old Burnet home was, the Crannig,
Ooh.
and what is now Crathes Castle.
Ooh.
Because it was when the castle was being built. So they were still kind of between.
Oh no.
And there's nothing on the loch anymore. It's not like there's a home still there. But people have seen her walking between the two.
That would be awful.
Yes.
Late at night, you're coming home on your horse and you see a white lady. Give that a wide berth.
Just wide Bertha.
Yeah.
Some people have said that it's Bertha. Just, trapped forever after being murdered before she could marry the man that she loved. But other people have said that it's Agnes.
Oh, interesting.
Who's being punished for what she did by being trapped there without rest.
Ooh.
So I don't know if it's Bertha, and I don't know if it's Agnes.
There'd be a poetic justice if it was Agnes.
Yes. If Bertha found peace, that would definitely be the nicer alternative.
She got her revenge and then found peace. Interesting.
Another part of the legend is that the White Lady haunts on the anniversary of her death. I couldn't find death dates for either woman or any dated reports of people seeing the White Lady. So I don't know about that part. I can't verify it, so I don't know.
Well, that's what you like to do. You like to get a little bit of fact to embed your story in.
It's very creepy.
Very creepy.
Especially because the whole thing just ended in death for everyone involved. I did check historically, and this Alexander's mother was called Agnes.
Oh, good.
All of that checks out.
Ooh, who do you think it is? Agnes or Bertha?
I think it would make more sense if it was Agnes. But then I guess Agnes ultimately did get what she wanted because Alexander married well. Bertha didn't.
Yeah.
So if you believe in the idea of unfinished business, Bertha would have more reason to stay.
Yeah, if it was a restless spirit, Bertha's definitely more hard done by because she got her revenge, but famously revenge doesn't make you feel better. So I'm leaning towards Bertha.
It would definitely be sadder if it was Bertha.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want that for her.
No, definitely not. But I feel like, to me, ghosts come from sadness a lot of the time.
Well, yeah, that's true. Just because I don't like it doesn't mean that's not how it goes. However, Crathes isn't known for its White Lady.
Oh. I didn't think it was. Because when we were there, I was like, was it a white lady I was reading about? I didn't think so, but...
Crathes is known for its Green Lady.
Oh, I see.
And it's the story of the Green Lady that drew me to Crathes in the first place.
Yeah, and that's the famous one, isn't it?
This is just an additional ghost. That's how haunted this place is.
Yeah.
You can just have an extra one and no one really pays it much mind.
Oh yeah, we see the White Lady all the time, but that's not what we're here for. We're here for the Green Lady. I feel like it was Stirling Castle had quite a few different ladies of different colours.
Yes.
That's our last, if you want to hear more about ghost ladies.
I mean, if you want a spooky story about a ghost lady, I feel like you should listen to The Black Lady of Lark Hall.
That's true.
Because that is still one of my favourite of the episodes that we've done.
Yeah, I think so. That's
very spooky.
Top tier of spooking.
So, the Green Lady of Crathes.
Yes.
Her identity isn't known. So, different to the White Lady where it could be a couple of people. And there is some historical record that might back it up. No one knows who the Green Lady is.
Okay.
At all. But she's been seen in one particular room of Crathes Castle.
Interesting.
And there seemed to be a spate of sightings a couple 100 years ago, and not as many since.
Huh.
But she's not completely gone.
Ooh. Lingering. Hit me up.
Legends differ, but the story goes that the Green Lady was a woman associated with the castle in some way. Some stories say she was the laird's daughter, or she was a servant working for the Burnett family. Ultimately, in all the stories, this woman becomes pregnant with someone that she's not supposed to get pregnant by. So in the version where she's the laird's daughter, she fell in love with one of the stable boys and fell pregnant. And in the version where she's the servant, it was the laird or some other man of higher social standing.
Yeah.
Who caused all her problems and put her in a pretty impossible situation.
Ain't that always the way?
Unfortunately common.
Yes. Men.
In both versions of the story, in every version of the story, it seems that the woman and her newborn child simply disappeared.
Well, we know what that means, don't we?
No one knows what happened to them. They were never seen again.
Seems unlikely that they ran off and lived happily ever after.
And since then, over several hundred years, stories of the Green Lady have plagued the castle. Some people report seeing green hazes, green orbs, and all of them concentrated in one room of the castle, like I said, now known as the Green Lady's room.
What else could you call it?
She's only been seen in that place. And for years, people kept seeing these green visions walking around and into the fireplace in this room.
Oh, okay.
With no clear reason for being there. Now, it was around the time of Alexander, the baronet with booty fear, that the sightings started happening.
Oh no, that's a damn shame for him. Quite frankly.
So 1700s.
Yes.
Mid-1700s.
What would a green haze? That's so unusual.
Clear enough that you can see the colour.
Yeah, well, that's just it, because we've seen a lot of like ghost photos on our Spook and Spoof series on Patreon of like kind of like mist kind of apparitions where they shouldn't be. But a green one.
I'd be interested to see what marsh gases look like.
Ooh, yeah, you definitely picture green.
Because in our Mary King's Close episode, we talked about it, and sometimes they can have lights. Or they create light.
That's true.
So maybe.
Maybe.
But you're pretty far from the old loch.
And for it to be inside the room.
And only that room.
Yeah. Strange.
There's even a claim that Queen Victoria saw the Green Lady with her own eyes when she visited Crathes.
Ooh, that's a tough one.
A very different kind of royal ghost.
Did she admit it or did she deny it? Because if you're a respected authority, like the Queen, you might just want to be like, nah, that's going to totally undermine my point if I tell everyone I just saw a ghost.
I couldn't find many details about this encounter. It seems to be a story that's passed down with the castle.
Interesting.
That Queen Victoria saw the Green Lady.
Wow.
But other stories claim that it was a different dignitary, a different noblewoman. It wasn't Queen Victoria at all.
Yep. A fish is this big. It was the Queen who saw it.
So you might be listening to all this and thinking, you know, knowing how I am about research and trying to double check things, that this legend shouldn't really be enough for me to justify going into a full episode.
Not when there's not... You don't know who it is. There's not a person behind this, even a name.
Might be striking you as a little strange. Well.
I'm excited.
In the 1800s, renovations were being done to Crathes. It was when Robert Burnet came over from America to take on the title. He made lots of changes to the castle, he and his wife. They were doing renovations in what is known as the Green Lady's room.
Yep.
Getting the place the way they wanted it. And as well as uncovering lots of the Renaissance paintings that now adorn the ceiling, the ones that had been painted years before, the bones of a baby were discovered under the hearth of the fireplace.
No.
In the Green Lady's room.
Ooh. Grim.
Some reports say the bones of a woman and a child, but at the very least the bones of a child were found under the fireplace in that room.
Oh no.
The fireplace where the Green Lady has been seen carrying her baby, disappearing into the fireplace.
That ups the spook now, doesn't it? Oh, there's a lot to unpack there. So it was a thing to put like cat bones behind your chimney, I think, wasn't it?
Yes, but not children.
Not children, though. That's grim.
There are very few reasons you would do that.
Why there? Why not bury them outside? Like, if you're wanting to hide them, which is presumably the only reason they would be there, somebody didn't want to know about them, why wouldn't you just bury them in the forest or something?
I have to assume that work was being done on the castle. You know, like with mob hits, that if a car park is being built.
Oh, yeah. They like pour them into the concrete kind of thing.
You know, no one's going to look.
Yep.
Work is happening anyway. You're not going to be discovered. That's what I'm wondering.
Now that would make sense. But, ew. Do you have any theories on who put them there? Who it is?
No one knows anything. I know that when they were discovered, I think it was afterwards. I think they were properly buried once they were discovered.
Good.
And it was after that that the sightings kind of stopped.
Interesting.
She wasn't really seen again.
Yeesh.
So I know that the remains were dealt with properly.
Uh-huh.
But no one knows.
Can you imagine being out in California? You're a rancher. You're doing quite well for yourself. Oh man, apparently I have to move to Scotland to take up the title of my family. And then you move from California to like Crathes in winter. So it's cold, it's dark, you're in a big drafty castle. You're trying to do it up to take it into the modern era of the 1800s. And then you find child bones in your fireplace. That's not going to be nice.
Mm-hmm. A bit close to the bone to have a skeleton in your closet, eh?
Ooh, very much so. I can't believe they have no idea.
No, and if you believe in ghost lore, I guess it kind of makes sense that she was never seen again.
Mm-hmm.
Because either she and her child were finally buried properly.
Oh, I'm glad that happened at least.
I'm sure. I for some reason I don't have it detailed in my script, but I'm sure I came across that they exhumed them.
Yeah.
And buried them. They didn't put them back.
Oh yeah, can you imagine they just carried on building the fireplace? That'd be horrible.
Yeah.
Well, I think that is a grade A reason for a haunting.
Right? It lends itself well to a haunting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite a creepy room. I can't say I enjoyed it in there. I didn't see or hear anything in there.
No.
When we visited, but it's a bit creepy. Even just without ghosts, just knowing what they found there.
Yes.
It's a bit odd.
It adds an edge to the room.
Mm-hmm.
If you visit the castle, you follow a kind of like one-way system up through and round. And so you come into one room, and I remember hearing something in the room beside me, like, what is that? So I peeked around across a little rope to stop you going in, and there was just some people in the room beside you. But it was that room in particular. Well,
what was worse was, as we were going round, before we got into the Green Lady's room, there's a music box playing.
Yes.
That was very creepy to hear from a different room.
Yep.
I didn't enjoy that.
Adds to the spook.
Yeah, I felt fine in there. I think it's being aware of the history of the place made it more unsettling than feeling oogly in any way.
Yeah.
I felt worse in the Laird's room than anywhere.
You did feel quite creeped out in the Laird's room.
It was the main bedroom of the place. I didn't like it in there at all.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of stuck my head in and just went, I don't want to be in there, and moved on.
In and outed.
Didn't like it. Don't know if it was the layout, maybe it was a bit dark. I'm not sure.
Not sure. Oh, it was a very friendly castle, though.
Very comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Very welcoming.
Compared to some of the other castles we've been in, which are a bit gloomy, I guess.
Leith Hall.
Leith Hall. We drove past the turnoff for Leith Hall with Ailey in the car going, I'm going to have to go back one day, haven't I? I'm like, yes, you are.
I don't want to, though.
You're going to have to.
I spoke to Graham from Scotland Stories.
Oh, yes.
About Crathes.
Mm-hmm.
We have met up and have recorded super secret things that you will be hearing very, very soon.
Maybe.
He used to work at Crathes.
Yes.
So really, he should be doing this episode, not me.
But we want you, Ailey. We want you to tell us.
He told me a few of the stories from his time working there. And he was good enough to share them with me, send them over. So I've written them down, and I'm going to tell you some of the things that he encountered during his time there.
Fantastic.
Or not that he encountered, but things that he heard of happening.
Yep.
Okay. Number 1.
Mm-hmm.
An Australian lady stepped onto the top step to start heading down from the gallery to the Green Lady's room. So there's the upper floor of the building that has these beautiful oak panelled ceilings.
Mm-hmm.
It's very long. And you go down a winding stair that takes you into the Green Lady's room.
Yes.
It's quite steep.
Yep. Your classic stone castle spiral staircase.
Yeah, Yukoda. So that's the layout.
Mm-hmm.
She heard a voice in her ear say, "Get out. Get out now. Don't enter the next room. Just leave."
That kept going. I thought it was just going to be get out.
Nope. Then she bolted down the stairs, out the front door, with the guide on the desk following her to find out what had happened.
Yes.
She told him word for word and then refused to go back in.
Don't blame her for that one.
And Graham says that was the week before I started.
Yeah, like post job interview, but before you've started. Yeah.
How creepy would that be?
Oh, man. I'd have to turn around.
It'd be awful.
That'd be awful.
Someone telling you leave
Yep.
now.
Mm.
Oh, that one gave me the bulk.
Yeah.
Especially because I've been down that staircase. So just like, oh, no.
Like, I've had it before when I've been outside, like doing stuff in the garden, and it's been particularly windy. And now and again, the wind will rush past my ear in a way that it kind of sounds like someone shouted, or there is just someone like one of the neighbours was shouting at a dog or something, but it gets like lost in the wind. And just that turn around because you think someone's spoken, you're just like, oh, that was kind of creepy. So to hear, and it's just like a murmuring, or because it's just the wind. So to hear clear words warning you of peril, nota.
I don't even think it's a warning of peril. I think it's, if you don't leave, I'm going to be angry.
Oh,
Leave.
that's true. Oh,
So creepy.
so creepy. I wonder what she did, you know? What the spirit wanted her to get out.
Oh, right. I thought it meant like her job. I'm like, honestly, don't know.
Yeah. What did she do to deserve it?
Uh-huh. I mean, maybe it was someone looking out for her saying, this woman's pissed. You should probably go.
Get out now. Bertha's coming.
So here's the second one. Graham sent me 3. One of the older guides who had worked at Crathes since the Burnets had claimed that she had seen green orbs in that room, but refused to tell anybody for decades because she was embarrassed.
I feel you on that one. Seeing a green orb.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to me, when ghost hunters talk about orbs, I think about seeing it through a camera.
Well, I think most often when you're looking at those ghost hunting shows, they're talking about them after the fact.
Yeah.
So they're looking back at the footage and seeing things. This is someone who's seeing it in person and seeing it enough that there's light or coloured light.
It's the coloured light. That makes it more interesting. Seeing it well enough to go, nope, didn't see that. You're right. Yeah, why? I don't know, just asking.
So what? I didn't see anything. Don't ask me. Don't ask me.
Don't ask me. That's cool. She'd worked there since the Burnets, though.
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting.
So she's been there a long time.
Mm-hmm. What do you think of that? Green orbs?
I think this is tricky for me because one of the guides that we spoke to talked about how they like to play tricks on new starts by like leaving green lights on in that room.
Yeah.
For them to have to go in and turn off or go in and look at.
Yep.
And I that makes a lot of sense. I can definitely see that happening.
Mm-hmm.
So this is tricky for me because that's all I can think of.
Yeah. What if you played a joke on someone and you were like, oh, did you see anything in that room? They're like, nope, not a thing. Oh, shit, the joke didn't work. So you don't mention it. And they've hung on to it for decades.
It went too well.
Yeah. And you just had no idea. Strange.
Right? I don't know what I make of that one.
I love these more first-hand accounts, though.
Right? That's why I asked.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3, last one. The old head guide was with some paranormal investigator folk in the old kitchen one night, holding those weird divining rod things.
Yep.
You can feel for that. You don't like them either.
No.
I'm not even saying Graham doesn't. Just you don't like them.
Yes, I've ranted about them in the Pool House episode.
Every day?
Every day over dinner. And another thing about divining rods.
The investigator asked if anybody was there and they started to move. But the head guide was a tough ex-policeman who didn't believe in ghosts, so thought it was some kind of trick.
Mm-hmm.
Then she asked if it was a girl and they violently swung round. So that apparently meant it was a boy. The guide started to feel cold and she got a thermometer out and said that, yep, the spot next to him was several degrees colder, but only up to the elbow.
Ooh.
So it must be the spirit of the young boy.
That's interesting.
That was enough for the tough old policeman. He got right out of there and into his office with the heater on full blast.
Now that's an interesting one.
Right? I like that one because it reminds me of my dad. I would pay good money to see that happen.
Oh, I would love to see your dad see a ghost.
I would pay, I think, just about anything anyone asked
That would be
if I could see that happen.
top dollar experience right there.
But knowing the type of person that my dad is, if that did happen and he genuinely believed it, that would freak me out more than anything.
Oh yeah, big time. Big time. That's the most interesting like use case of cold spots I've heard of, I think.
Yeah.
For all the times we've like talked about it and like watching Most Haunted and stuff. Because as you walk around castles, there are cold spots because they don't hold temperature very well. So,
Old buildings, thick stone walls.
yeah, drafty. They're not particularly insulated anyway.
Although Crathes was very comfortable.
It was very comfortable. It was a nice day when we were there too. It wasn't particularly cold or windy. So, temperature fluctuates. So to say, oh, there's a cold spot. I'm like, yes. Why would it be a steady temperature across this whole building? That doesn't happen anywhere. We walked into our office and it was cold. Anyway. So to have a like elbow high cold spot is much more intriguing.
Very focused spot.
Mm-hmm.
Different to everything else immediately around it.
Yeah.
It's creepy.
So I think that's the spooky factor of these ghost hunts and using tools and things is when they all line up at once. Like everything comes together and you're just like, ooh, that's funny.
Does that make it more compelling for you?
I think so.
Yeah. Or does it just not move you up or down?
A bit more compelling to have all these things kind of stacking up together. You've got the non-believer experiencing it. I wouldn't know anything about that.
Well, yeah, 'cause you saw a ghost.
You've got the divining rods, which are my favourite. But then also with the temperature thing.
Well, see, you don't need divining rods because you just saw a ghost.
Makes it more compelling. I'll punch you.
You can try. You have to catch me first.
I'll go straight through you like a ghost.
So thanks to Graham for sending those over.
Thank you, Graham.
From his time working at Crathes.
Mm-hmm.
Check him out at Scotland Stories on Instagram.
Instagram.
And he has a book. You should buy it.
Called Scotland Stories.
But yeah, that is the story and the spooks of Crathes Castle.
Interesting.
But I want to hear what you think about the spooks in particular.
The spooks in particular.
Yes.
Well, I expected a wider variety of spooks.
There really isn't. It's very focused legends, very focused. I hesitate to even say activity because it doesn't really happen all that much anymore. There was just a lot more concentrated sightings before the bones were found.
Yeah.
And not as much after.
So I like that. I enjoy that as part of the story. Yeah, so I don't know if I'm more compelled at these kind of localized ghosts, as you say, as opposed to like a ghost boy and a ghost piper and a ghost dog and a white lady and a figure in a window. Not sure.
The fact that bones were discovered.
Well, that's just spooky.
That's enough to give me pause and consider it, even with like less evidence than we've had in other episodes. That's enough for me to stop and go, well, there might be something there.
Yeah.
Maybe there was something there and there isn't anymore.
Maybe.
But that's weird.
That is weird. And it's a scary story to hear because there is no resolution at all.
Mm-mm.
And you're not going to write it down, are you? If you buried bones under your fireplace.
Oh, you're not going to let on.
Put that in your diary. Dear diary, today I,
Well, see, if I look at the legends, I feel like it might be more likely that it was that she was some kind of servant.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like you could get away much more easily without recording her identity, or proof of her existence might not survive in the same way that, we talked about the Burnets for 2 hours. There's records.
Yeah. That makes more sense to me. But then even there's plenty of more famous women who don't get their name recorded anywhere.
Well, yeah, which is why this wouldn't even raise a red flag, is what I'm trying to say.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, there'd be no like, oh, where's such and such's pay slip?
Because this is entirely normal.
Yep. Unfortunately. That's far spookier than any ghost, isn't it?
Tell me about it. Fucking patriarchy.
Patriarchy. Yeah, pretty spooky. I didn't get a good like spooked out vibe while we were there, but I never do. So
Except that one time.
So that doesn't really mean much.
I hope you enjoyed the tale. I hope you enjoyed how history heavy this still was, considering it's supposed to be a spooky episode. But I think it's worth it just for this one legend.
Yeah.
Enthralled me enough that I thought, yep, we need to dig into it.
Mm-hmm. I certainly enjoyed being here.
Well, that's a relief.
Which is all that matters. Because it's all about me. ABC, all about Kieran.
I hope you enjoyed listening at home. Let me know what you think.
Let us know what you think about the ghosts. Are you compelled? Are you curious to go and see yourself? See for yourself?
See, it's a funny thing because weirdly, I don't have a lot of evidence to present you. Like, not a lot of accounts, not a lot of reports. But I think the evidence that I have brought forward is some of the most compelling because it's so concrete.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that.
So there's less of it, but I think the fact that remains were found is more compelling than when you hear like doors slamming and you hear of all these little things happening all the time. It's a weird balance.
Yes. It's interesting. They're each their own kind of type of, I guess, like haunting or spooky story, aren't they? If you would like to support Generally Spooky History, you can consider leaving us a review.
Mm-hmm. It's great. It's free. It takes a couple minutes. And you can say what you like. If there's things we can improve on, tell us.
You can let us know.
We can do it.
We're happy to hear it. You can head over to Patreon, where we post all our extra awesome content. Or you can buy our merch over at generallyspooky.com. Or for a no-cost way to support the podcast, you can tell a friend.
Yeah.
If you think you know someone who'd enjoy the podcast, you can send them a link to an episode and ask them to listen. If you would like. I don't know how to round off this point.
I'm going to go for a nap. That's how I'm going to round off my work for today. I'm going to go for a sleep. It's going to be great.
You don't want to record the blether for Patreon first?
I could do that in my sleep. No?
I mean, I could do all the talking for both of us.
Excellent exclusive content over on Patreon. Don't miss it. I might. But we will be back next week.
Yes, we will. Bye.
Bye.